Following is an audio presentation of The Haunting of Lancaster 2, Spiritual Warfare, read to you by its author, James Griffin. This story is a work of fiction. Names, characters, events, and incidents are the products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events are purely coincidental. Chapter 1, Familiar Ground. You, devil, are not Michael Newman's judge, nor has he faced judgment, Pastor Martin yells at his adversary, for his body is still alive, and he has never given himself over to you. Release him in the name of Jesus, Reverend Martin and Cody both scream in unison. As the command leaves their mouths, there is no great battle that takes place. It is instead as if the lights have suddenly been turned on, and the darkness flees as the light of God floods into the old house. Demonic influences are instantly eradicated and cast out. Long rotting curtains and dirty windows explode as if anything that would hinder the light is removed. And for the first time, the sound of birds can be heard, and the beauty of God's world is restored to this long vacated property. This, of course, was nearly 6 years ago. Cody has since become a local youth pastor and one of the finest Christian men the community of Lancaster has ever seen. Pastor Martin, once he had cast the devil out of it, had no use for the old Bradbury estate. So as the last living relative of the Bradburys, he surrendered the property to the city, hoping that they would tear the mansion down and find some use for the land. The city, of course, opted instead to keep the old estate, seeing value in the handcrafted wood and the early American craftsmanship. Though the property itself remains intact, it is still vacant, and it has remained quiet since that day, or at least that's what most people believe. There are, however, others who suspect that there are still things happening in that old mansion that have gone unobserved. Kind of like the old adage, if a tree falls in the woods, but there's no one there to hear it, does it make any noise? This is the theory that leads a new group of visitors to venture upon the old gravel roadway, approaching the dilapidated structure. They are driving a beat-up blue van covered with more rust than paint, with a large magnetized sign on each door that says, Journals of the Paranormal. As the van comes to a stop in front of the old mansion, 3 men exit, one manning a smartphone camera, another just kind of looking around but staying close by his friends, and the third holding a microphone plugged into a small handheld speaker. This is Devin Spears, the man says into the microphone, host of Journals of the Paranormal. With me, as always, is our technical engineer, Lance Fleming. Lance, the young man that had previously been wandering around, steps into the video shot, waving, Hey everyone! And we have Matt Jenkins behind the camera as usual, Devin continues. We are here tonight in the town of Lancaster at the old Bradbury estate. Those of you who know anything about the things of the supernatural have no doubt heard of not only this town but also this old mansion. For it's been rumored that just over 5 years ago, this was the scene of a huge confrontation between the forces of good and the forces of evil. But how many of these rumors are true? Today we intend on finding out, and we want you to come along. As Devin, the young man with the microphone, stops talking, the 3 friends begin walking up the old walkway, then up the steps. Matt, the guy with the cell phone, records wildly, trying to capture their every step. Upon reaching the main door of the old mansion, Devin reaches out, taking the knob in his hand, and opens it slowly. The 3 men look at one another nervously as they enter the foyer area, which is a shambles, not only covered with cobwebs and dust, but also pieces of shattered furniture strewn about. The men navigate through the foyer and into a large ballroom. As they stand there, their dime store flashlights with no-name batteries already beginning to flicker, they hear something. All 3 of them stand perfectly still, Matt doing the best that he can to record the events that are taking place around them. They hear it again. It sounds like a disembodied voice coming from near the foyer area, Devin says excitedly under his breath. This is Devin Spears again, your host from Journals of the Paranormal, Devin continues as he steps in front of Matt's cell phone camera. We were right, ladies and gentlemen. We surmised that though the battle for the soul of Lancaster ended many years ago, the possession did not. The forces in this old house have simply been quiet because they've been alone. Suddenly the 3 men see a light shining from the foyer area into the ballroom near them. That was where we just came from, Lance says nervously to his 2 friends. The 3 of them huddle together, nearly shaking, when they hear the voice cry out again. This is Officer Warren of the Lancaster Police Department. You're trespassing. Suddenly, Officer Warren steps from the foyer into the room, flashlight in hand, and the three would-be paranormal investigators, though relieved, are again quite nervous. "But, officer," Devin says nervously, "I thought this was public property." "It is," Officer Warren responds. "It belongs to the city." "Then we aren't trespassing, then, are we?" Devin asks, a little more confidently. "Unless you have a permit issued by the city, I'm afraid you are," Officer Warren responds. "May I suggest that you get back into your van and go back to wherever it is that you gentlemen are staying?" "Yes, sir," all three men respond as they begrudgingly leave the mansion. Chapter 2. What do we do now? About an hour later, the three would-be ghost hunters are sitting in the Lancaster cafe, sharing a large order of fries and some overpriced sodas. "So where do we go from here?" Devin asks his two friends. "I mean, this was our shot." "Well, maybe we should do what that cop said," Matt responds. "Maybe we should try to get a permit from the city." "The city isn't going to give us a permit," Lance responds. "There's no way that their insurance carrier is going to sign off on a bunch of out-of-towners exploring a condemned building on city property." "So I guess we're done," Devin responds as he sits back in his seat looking up at the cafe ceiling in disgust. About that time, a Lancaster local, a clean-cut high school senior wearing a school logo jacket, walks up to the three men. "Excuse me, is that your van parked outside?" the young man asks. "Yeah," Devin responds quietly, hardly looking up at the boy. "So can I ask, what are the Journals of the Paranormal?" the young man asks inquisitively. "That's our internet live stream show, where we investigate everything from ghosts to aliens," Devin responds half-heartedly, still not looking up at the boy. "Wow," the local replies. "So what are you doing in Lancaster? Nothing ever happens here." "Well, a little over 5 years ago, there was supposedly a demon infestation at the old Bradbury estate. We were hoping to do a show about it," Lance responds. "A show?" Devin says frustratedly. "No, we were going to do the show about it. This live stream was going to put us on the map." "Oh yeah, I heard about the Bradbury estate thing," the young man says, "but honestly, I don't remember it very well, as I was pretty young at the time." "But do you think there was something to it?" the boy asks inquisitively. "Well, others do, and if they do, then they'll watch. This could have made us the next hit cable television show," Devin explains. "But no, a cop shows up and runs us off." "How do you know you were in there?" the local boy asks. "I assume that he saw our van parked outside." "Yeah, that would do it," the boy says, nearly laughing. "Maybe I can give you a hand." "Can you get us a permit from the city?" Devin asks, looking up at him dismissively. The young man laughs. "My friends, I am your permit. See, I am Garrett Pike. My dad is Andrew Pike, the mayor of Lancaster." "What?" all three friends shout. "So you can get us a permit?" "No," Garrett says, shaking his head. "Dad would never knowingly allow anyone in that old mansion, not even me. But I can probably keep you from getting arrested." "I mean, who wants to be the local cop that takes the mayor's kid to jail?" Garrett says laughingly. "As the old saying goes, I won't ask for permission, but if we get caught, I'll just ask for forgiveness. The only catch is, you have to be willing to leave your van here and take my car, and I get to go with you," Garrett says. "Deal," Devin agrees enthusiastically. The four young men, Garrett Pike and his three new friends, Devin Spears, Lance Fleming, and Matt Jenkins, pile into Garrett's old 70s Monte Carlo with a few small pieces of ghost hunting equipment, and they drive slowly down Lancaster's Main Street until they finally pull up outside of a well-kept ranch-style red brick home. "This is my girlfriend Candace's place," Garrett explains. "I know that we still have to walk about a mile to get to the Bradbury estate, but by parking here, no one will even notice my vehicle." As the four men clamber from the car, Candace, seeing Garrett pull up outside, comes running out to greet him. "Garrett, I didn't know you were coming over tonight." "I'm sorry, Candace. Honestly, I'm not. We just needed someplace to park my car where it would go unnoticed." "Why? What exactly is it that you and your friends are up to there, Mr. Pike?" Candace asks Garrett teasingly, as she looks at his newfound friends inquisitively. "This is Devin, Lance, and Matt," Garrett says as a means of introduction. "They operate a streaming channel on the internet called the Journals of the Paranormal." "Oh, hi," Candace says, greeting each of the young men politely. "So what are you doing here in Lancaster?" "Remember those old stories about the Bradbury mansion?" Garrett asks. "Well, sure," Candace responds, "but that was years ago. I mean, that old place is just up the road, and I've not heard a thing from that place since I was a kid." "But have you not heard anything because there's nothing to hear? Or because there's no one there to hear it? Devin asked spookily. We're going to go up there tonight and see if that old mansion is as quiet as it seems, Garrett says, dismissing Devin's creepiness. Can you let your parents know that I went with some friends and I'll be back in the morning to get my car? Candace stands there shaking her head at Garrett disbelievingly. Well, with the risk of you being so close by, I guess my dad won't be getting much sleep tonight, she says laughingly. With a brief kiss, the young couple part as Garrett and his newfound ghost-hunting friends begin their short trek to the old Bradbury mansion and hopefully paranormal history. Chapter 3. Here we go again. Officer Joe Sheridan, the former police partner of Michael Newman, pulls up outside of Cody's residence, Michael's son. He navigates up the walkway, reaching the front door where he is quickly and pleasantly greeted by Catherine, Cody's wife. Hey, Cody calls out, jumping from his seat and walking over to his dad's old friend as Joe steps into the house. Come in, Cody says enthusiastically, stepping aside and showing Officer Sheridan into the living room. How have you been? I've been good. I hope you and your family are doing well. Yeah, you know us. We're kicking, just not too high, Cody says laughingly. So what's up? Well, it's no big deal, really. But I thought you should know. There were some kids, some wannabe ghost hunters, caught up at the old Bradbury estate tonight. I mean, they were told to leave, and they did so, but I still wanted to let you know. Cody lets out a frustrated sigh. How I wish that people understood what they were messing with when they play with these things. Well, in their defense, Joe responds, I mean, yeah, we both know that the thing that attacked me and your dad was just a little more intense than the norm, but I'm sure that these kids just assumed that they were going to be facing some run-of-the-mill ghost. There's no such thing as a run-of-the-mill ghost, Cody responds in a rather serious tone. Hebrews 9:27 says it's appointed unto men once to die, but after this the judgment. It doesn't say it's appointed unto men once to die, then the haunting, or then the reincarnation. It says then the judgment. So what are you saying? Joe asks rather dismissively. I mean, you, more than anyone, knows that there are ghosts. Or have you forgotten what happened at the Bradbury estate nearly 6 years ago? No, trust me, I've not forgotten a thing. But think about it, Joe. In Luke 11:24-26, Jesus teaches us about unclean spirits being cast out. They wander to and fro, seeking a new home. This scripture has a direct correlation with disembodied spirits, yet it does not speak of human spirits. It instead speaks about unclean spirits or demons. When a ghost is encountered, people are not seeing or communicating with a person from the past. They are instead dealing with an unclean spirit or a demon. Okay, I get what you're saying, but how do you explain legitimate seances or Ouija board sessions where people hear from those who have died, especially when these people make direct contact with someone that they knew or were close to? From the time of our birth, demons have studied every one of us. They've oppressed us, they have tempted us, they have even possessed some of us. Based on these facts, they know everything that there is to know about each and every one of us. So trust me, Joe, they are more than able to reveal anything that they want to about us. Joe sits there rather perplexed for a few moments, pondering on what Cody has just revealed to him. So what about when someone sees a ghost that they recognize? Maybe someone that they knew or loved, Joe asks in a concerned tone. The Bible tells us that the devil can appear as an angel of light. It also tells us that we can entertain angels unaware. So is it any surprise if demons can take a human or a ghostly form? Think about it, Joe. It's appointed unto us once to die, then the judgment. The Bible warns us that there are disembodied spirits that know everything that there is to know about each and every one of us. And these disembodied spirits have the ability to take on our appearance. Okay, so earlier you said that there's no such thing as reincarnation. What does that have to do with demons? And how do you explain those that have memories of past lives? I mean, don't get me wrong, I've never been a proponent of such things. I'm just trying to understand. The past lives that these people are remembering are not their own. These people are seeing the lives of those that were previously impacted by the same demons that are now assigned to torment them. Yes, Joe, demons, just like people, have memories. Only theirs stretch beyond the confines of a single human life. With those words, both men sit in silence for a few moments, Joe trying to take in all that he has just learned, and Cody trying to suppress his concerns over people showing a renewed interest in the Bradbury estate. Chapter 4. Old demons never die. Devin, once again with the microphone in hand, takes a position in front of Matt's cell phone camera. That's right, folks. We're once again at the Bradbury estate in Lancaster, Illinois. Thus far, things have been pretty quiet, but I'm confident that as we progress, we're going to find the action that we're looking for. Lance comes over, taking a position beside Devin, in front of the camera, holding a small piece of equipment in his hand. This is an EMF, or an electromagnetic field meter, Lance explains to the internet audience. This device can detect electromagnetic fields such as those that emanate from ghosts. Lance turns the device on and dramatically walks away, going from room to room, holding the EMF detector out in front of him, pointing it in the direction of darkened corners, wide open rooms, and nearly unseen pathways. Yet the meter remains silent, giving no indication of anything abnormal in this supposedly haunted mansion. Matt then redirects the camera back on Devin, prompting him to say something before they lose viewers. Devin holds up a small tape recorder and explains. Ghosts often communicate in frequencies that are unheard by human ears, but they can be detected, even recorded by digital recorders. These recordings are called EVPs, or electronic voice phenomena. So I'm going to begin an EVP session by conducting a type of interview by asking an unseen entity a series of questions. This is Devin Spears from Journals of the Paranormal. It's May 29th of 2022, and we are currently located at the Bradbury estate, Devin says loudly into his digital recorder as a means of tagging the recording. I want to start by asking if there is anyone here who wishes to speak with us tonight. Evan then sits in silence, allowing the spirits to respond to his question. After a few seconds, he asks the ghosts in the room, Do you mind introducing yourself to us? My name is Devin Spears. What's your name? Again, Devin sits in silence for a few seconds, allowing the spirit the opportunity to respond. With this, Devin concludes his initial EVP session and he hands the digital tape recorder off to Lance, the technical engineer of the group, who promptly rewinds the recording and hits play. As Matt continues streaming the investigation, the broadcast audience listens to the EVP session results. They once again hear Devin's questions, but then, to the team's dismay, Devin's questions are followed by nothing more than dead air. They each stand there in silence, not sure where to go from there, until Garrett Pike jumps in with, Maybe we should conduct a spirit box session. We'd love to, but we don't have one, Devin responds sadly. Those things are pretty expensive. How about a Ouija board? Garrett asks, getting a little desperate to save the team's live stream. No, we don't have one of those either, Matt responds. Honestly, I've never been very comfortable with them. Well, I'll tell you what. How do you gentlemen feel about conducting a seance? Garrett asks. My girlfriend, Candace, has a friend that's a medium. When I saw the issues that you were having, I took the liberty to give her a call, and she should be here any minute. Great idea, Devin nearly shouts. Redirecting the camera towards himself, Devin takes over the broadcast. Did you hear that, ladies and gentlemen? We're going to be conducting a seance right here at the infamous Bradbury estate in the next few minutes. But as we wait, Matt's going to take you on a little tour to allow you to enjoy the beauty of this old mansion just as we have. With that, Devin directs Matt to wander through the lower section of the house, trying to keep their audience pacified while they wait. Garrett, seeing headlights outside, goes into the foyer, peeking through some cracks in the old door, trying to see who it is, concerned that it could be the police. The car, however, doesn't appear to be a police cruiser, at least not a standard one, as it looks more like a silver 90s model Dodge Intrepid. The car doors open and two young women step out of the vehicle. As they stand there looking around, Garrett throws open the front door and shouts, Hi there, are you Marissa? The girl who got out of the driver's side of the car looks up and shouts back, Yes. Then the girl who got out of the passenger side of the car waves. Yes, Garrett, it's us, Candace calls out. I thought I told you to walk from your house, Candace, Garrett asks, somewhat frustrated. I wasn't going to walk when I have a perfectly good car, Marissa responds. All right, Garrett calls back. Come on in. As the two girls reach the main entrance, Candace throws her arms around Garrett's neck, hugging and kissing him. Marissa then reaches her hand toward Garrett, and they shake hands politely. So Candace tells me that you're wanting to conduct a seance, Marissa asks. Yeah, is that something that you can do? Garrett asks in return. Marissa just stares at him in disbelief. Then stepping past him, she enters the foyer and then the ballroom, where she finally responds, Yeah, I think I'll manage. As Garrett and the two girls enter the main ballroom, Devin and Matt come running. "Here we are, ladies and gentlemen," Devin says excitedly, jumping in front of Matt, who is still manning his cell phone camera. Devin then proceeds to take Marissa through a small on-camera introduction to their internet viewers. While unseen and unheard by many in the room or via camera, Marissa's spirit guide, Hen, whispers, "I can sense that there was a great power here. Perhaps his power is now gone, but his aura remains." Marissa, feeling her spirit guide's apprehension, nearly backs out of performing the requested seance, but then as Hen realizes that he has the opportunity to claim new ground, he and she in turn consent. "Okay," Marissa tells the others, "we need to come together in a circle, and we need to join hands." The group does as they are instructed, all but Matt, who is still operating the cell phone camera. "This circle will be our place of power," Marissa explains. "As long as we maintain this circle, we will control whatever entity we conjure up from the world beyond. And I, through you," Hen says laughingly, "will control the power that once dwelled here." "Bring it back, Marissa. By the power of Hen, bring it back." Hen screams unheard by any other than Marissa. At Hen's bequest, Marissa goes into a trance and begins chanting unrecognizable utterances, grunts, and even growls. Garrett and his friends stand there dismayed at what they are seeing and hearing, but just as they are preparing to release hands, a shimmer of light is seen in the center of their circle. Then a black mist begins to form around it. At the same time, Officers Shane Reynolds and Anthony Todd pull up outside of the estate, running a 1028 vehicle check on Marissa's car. He then radios dispatch and advises, "It looks like someone is out here at the Bradbury estate. Show us out of the car here." Meanwhile, inside the mansion, Hen excitedly watches as the light within the seance circle becomes brighter and the mist becomes darker. Marissa's chants become louder and more pronounced, and her body begins to shake and convulse. Hen suddenly realizes that whatever is appearing in this black mist is beyond his ability to control. Begins to try and bring Marissa back, but then a small boy appears amid the circle. The child appears to be around the age of 10, and he is wearing a dark-colored vintage-style suit, a dirty white shirt, and a dark-colored bow tie. The boy stands there, looking at those surrounding him, staring blankly at one and then the other. Candace begins to release her hands when Hen cries out through Marissa's body, "No, this child is not what it seems." Garrett and Lance grab Candace's hands, holding her in place. "But he is scared," Candace says sympathetically. The boy suddenly begins crying, which prompts Candace to struggle against Garrett and Lance. Hen cries out again through Marissa, "Hold her! Maintain this circle at all costs!" At that moment, Officers Todd and Reynolds enter the ballroom through the main foyer. One of them, Officer Todd, calls out, "Everyone freeze! You're trespassing on city property!" The boy stops crying, tilting his head slightly upward, looking beyond the seance circle, ignoring the police officers. He peers directly at Hen, piercing through the demon's cloak of invisibility. "You think that you can control me through these maggots of humanity? I am Lord Agramon, the demon of fear, and you, my witless comrade, and these worms that follow you will know fear when I am through with you." At this, the boy's body suddenly begins to lose its consistency, stretching and pulling into a dark, shadowy mass of sludge. Within seconds, what had just been a small boy now appears as an 8-foot dark shadow. The police officers' eyes and mouths wide open draw their weapons, screaming at the ghost hunters to get back. Marissa cries out, "No, we must maintain the circle. It's all that holds him." Agramon gives a sinister laugh at Hen's feeble attempt to maintain control as he thrusts his arms forward, releasing a blast of wind, knocking the ghost hunters and their friends to the ground, rendering them unconscious. "Freeze!" Officer Todd screams, though startled, and he begins firing into the dark void that moves ever closer to them. Officer Reynolds, on the other hand, stands there motionless, frozen in fear, quickly losing control of his bladder. He urinates in his uniform pants. "Reynolds, pull it together, man," Todd screams. Chapter 5. It's as if I never left. Within minutes, the long vacated car park just outside of the Bradbury mansion is covered by police cars and ambulances. First responders are running in and out of the old estate, doing their best to render first aid to those that had just moments before made up the circular perimeter of the seance. those who Hen had declared were the front line of defense. Matt, the Journals of the Paranormal cameraman, is cowering in a corner of the old ballroom, screaming and crying hysterically as a police officer does his best to talk to him and triage his condition. Matt's friends, Devin and Lance, along with the locals that they had recently met, Garrett, Candace, and Marissa, are still laying unmoved from the floor where they were knocked by the demon Agramon. Emergency personnel are surrounding the injured, and paramedics take vital signs and radio their condition to the Livingston Memorial Hospital Trauma Center. Within seconds, Candace is loaded onto an ambulance gurney, with oxygen being administered via a manual pump. They quickly lift her and wheel her out of the building, loading her into the nearest ambulance. Their paramedic allows 2 emergency medical technicians to man the ambulance so that he can move to the next patient. The EMTs take off with lights and sirens en route to the hospital. Cody and Catherine, who are home in bed, sound asleep, are suddenly awakened when their phone rings just after 2 a.m. Cody, wiping his tired face with his hand, looks down at his cell phone and sees that the call is coming from Officer Joe Sheridan. "Hi, Joe," Cody says tiredly into his phone. "Is everything all right?" "Hi, Cody. I'm sorry to be bothering you at this hour, but I wanted to let you know that those kids snuck back into the Bradbury estate. According to reports, most of them seem to be in a coma-like condition, similar to the one that your father was in after he was attacked there." "Wow. Okay, thanks for letting me know, Joe. I'm going to head in that direction." With that, Cody ends the call, jumping to his feet to get ready, and he explains to his wife, Catherine, what is going on. "I'd rather you didn't go to that place, Cody. Even without that devil, there are far too many memories, and with the passing of your father, you don't need to relive any of them." "Catherine," Cody says reassuringly to his wife, "Dad's traffic accident had nothing to do with the demon that attacked him there. If anything, I'm thankful for what that devil did to Dad, as its attack restored Dad's relationship with God. For as the Bible says, what was meant for evil, God used for good." With those words, Cody takes his wife into his arms, holding her tightly. "I'm going to be just fine, Catherine, for who is in me is greater than he that opposes me." "I know," Catherine says, wiping tears from her eyes, "but that knowledge doesn't make me not worry about you." With that, Cody kisses his wife lovingly, and then continues getting ready as Catherine goes down to the kitchen to make him some coffee. She still hates the thought of Cody returning to that accursed mansion, but she understands why he needs to. By the time Cody arrives, the ambulances have already left, taking the victims of this demonic attack to the hospital. Cody exits his vehicle and walks up to a rookie police officer near the front door of the old estate. "I'm sorry, sir, there's nothing to see here," the young officer proclaims boldly. "You need to get back in your car and vacate the property." With that, Cody tries to explain who he is, but is cut off by the young officer, who again directs him to get back in his car and leave. "Look, if you'll just tell Officer Sheridan that I'm here, he'll clear all this up." "Officer Sheridan is not here, sir, so again I'm asking you to leave." Cody steps back, pulling his cell phone from his pocket, calling Officer Sheridan. Cody asks, "Joe, where are you?" "I'm at the office," Joe responds. "Sorry, I've not stepped foot on that property since that day with your dad, and honestly, I don't plan on ever going back to that place again. But if you'll let me speak to the officer, I'll clear up the confusion." "Okay, thanks, Joe, but you know you need to face your fear about this place." "Well, that's not going to happen," Joe says dismissively, "but I'll keep your concerns in mind." With that, Cody hands his phone over to the young police officer, who finally relents and allows him to pass. Catherine had been correct. Walking up the old steps, opening the door, and walking through the foyer and entering the ballroom brings back so many memories. Nothing has changed in the past 5+ years. Everything was just as it was when he was last there. Unseen by not only Cody, but also the many police officers and investigators at the scene, the demons Agramon and Hen are observing all of the human activity taking place. "It is him," Agramon says in anger. "Who, my master?" Hen asks submissively, never even lifting his eyes due to the fear that now controls him. "Cody, the maggot that helped to cast me out of this world last time that I was here," Agramon says, clenching his fist. At this, the demon Hen looks up, curious to see who is powerful enough to cast the devil who now controls him out. "Perhaps this human could be the key to freeing me from Agramon's control," he thinks to himself. "He doesn't look like much to me, my master. Surely he would be no match to one as great as you." "That's why you're a fool," Agramon says angrily. He will not succumb to spiritual tricks or manipulation as most do. To the contrary, I will need to find another like him, a human that can be manipulated into taking his life. Surely, with your authority, finding a pawn such as this should not be an issue for you, Hin says, trying to pacify Agramon's anger. No, I hold a great deal of influence over demonic forces, as I am the ruler of over 40 legions, but I have never really held much sway with humans, for I never felt them worthy of my time or effort. Perhaps I can help you then, my king, for I have a great many humans that look to me for my leadership and my spiritual guidance, Hin says with a mischievous smile. I wouldn't trust a sniveling, boot-licking lackey such as yourself to accomplish even the most minimal of tasks for me, much less one foolish enough to follow you, Agramon says harshly. No, I need one of Shiva's followers, for though human, they are both perseverant and loyal. Yes, they are still fools, for they are of the race of Adam. But for the task that I need performed, they are perfect. I am already looking at a dead man. He just doesn't know it yet, Agramon says, making note of Cody's every move. Chapter 6. Spiritual Conspiracy. Meanwhile, in the neighboring town of Jonathan, Illinois, Andy Juergens, his wife Laura, and their young daughter Amy leave the local movie theater and find that their vehicle has been disabled. It seems that as they were enjoying the movie, someone had slashed one of their rear tires. Most people would have become frustrated, launching into a tirade, but Andy, being the positive person that he is, just smiles and gives his daughter Amy a casual wink, and then opens his trunk and begins changing the tire without a single word of complaint. Within moments, other movie patrons come and go, clearing the parking lot, and just as it seems that Andy and his family are all that remain, they are suddenly startled by the voice of a young man approaching them from the rear of their vehicle. "Hey," the man calls out, smiling. "I hate it when I have car trouble. Is there anything that I can do to help?" "No, we're fine," Andy replies with a smile. "I'll be done here in just a few more minutes, but I appreciate it." Despite Andy's rejection of the young man's offer to help, the man continues to approach the family, seeming to pay particular attention to Laura and Amy, who are standing just beyond Andy, near the front of their car. Andy stands to his feet, smiling politely, attempting to appear at ease, but remaining very attentive to the man's presence. "Look," Andy says as politely as possible, "I appreciate your offering to help, but as I'm sure you can understand, the fact that we don't know you is making my family rather uncomfortable. We're fine, so perhaps you need to move along." "Oh, gee, I hate to hear that I'm making your family uncomfortable," the man says shallowly, "as I have every intention of making that attractive little wife of yours as comfortable as I can." Andy looks to his wife, now confident that they are in danger. "This sure is a nice car," the young man continues flatly. "A luxury sedan in this neighborhood? That's probably why it was chosen. Whoever cut your tire probably figured that you'd be an easy mark, with quite a few bucks in your pocket. And now that I see that you have a nice-looking wife, I can see that I chose well." The man's voice trails off as he reveals that he was the one that sabotaged the young family's car. The would-be assailant then draws a butterfly knife, flipping it open and then closing it quickly, just to repeat the process menacingly multiple times, laughing as he moves closer to Andy. "Look," Andy says, pulling his wallet from his back pocket and tossing it to the ground in front of the man. "I have over $300 in that wallet, plus credit cards. Take it and go. Just leave my family alone." The young man looks from Andy to Laura and then to little Amy, giving a slight lick to his lips. "No, I think I want more than your money," the man says, now standing within 4 feet of Andy. With a quick thrust, the mugger jabs the knife at Andy's midsection, but unknown to the attacker, Andy has martial arts training, so he easily sidesteps the attack using an inward cross block, shoving the knife to the side with his right hand, and then following up his attacker's arm, he lands a quick back fist, striking the young man in the face, knocking him to the ground. As the mugger falls, his knife clatters on the pavement. Amy, hiding behind her mother, begins to cry, which draws Andy's attention, giving the mugger time to draw a previously unseen semi-automatic weapon from his waistband, instantly firing, striking Andy with 2 slugs in the chest. The demonic spiritual entity Shiva that has been following not only the events in this parking lot, but many of the events within the mugger's life begins to cackle with glee. The pain and the suffering of the human race are all that the devil and his minions truly want. and they love the fact that the ignorant among us can be so easily manipulated into causing much of it. At the sound of the mugger's gun, police officers in a passing squad car flip on their emergency lights and do an immediate U-turn, heading in the family's direction. The attacker grabs Andy's wallet, which was still laying where Andy had thrown it, and he calls out to Laura and Amy, who are knelt by Andy's side crying. I apologize that we aren't going to be able to continue our little adventure, but as you can see, local law enforcement is about to interrupt our fun, so I hope that you can forgive me. With that, the mugger runs from the crime scene and escapes just before the police arrive. A few hours later, Dylan stands there motionless, staring into the cold eyes that are staring back into his. He wants to feel some form of compassion, but he can't. All he feels is a sense of loathing, a hatred that is beyond normal disdain. This man, if that's what he is, that stares back at him, needs to die. But is he, Dylan Rollins, man enough to be the one to do it? Suddenly, the two figures move. Dylan draws a small semi-automatic weapon from his waistband, the same one he used last night, pointing it into the face that stares back at him. How he longs to pull the trigger, just as he had the night before. But even as he contemplates his next move, he is suddenly teleported back in time to a memory from his childhood. In this memory, Dylan is about 8 years old, playing with small toys as his family's pastor stands behind the pulpit quoting Joshua 24, calling out to the congregation, "Choose you this day whom you shall serve." Strangely, this memory is the one that comes to Dylan at this moment. He wasn't old enough to contemplate the seriousness of the pastor's words at the time, but now, as they replay in his mind, he understands them fully, just as he did last night when he tried to take the life of a young father who was only protecting his family. Dylan knew that pulling that trigger was wrong, and now he knows that he will be punished for what he's done. He had seen the police sketch shown on the local news, and it was a spitting image of him. There was no way that the police would not be taking him into custody for shooting that man. Apparently, the man had survived, and either he or that little wife of his was very observant, Dylan thinks to himself. As Dylan lowers his weapon, he leans his face into the face looking back at him from the mirror, and he bangs his two fists on the bathroom sink, cracking the porcelain in front of him. "What am I going to do?" Dylan cries aloud. The demon Shiva, who had laughed in glee at the destruction that her little pawn had caused the night before, whispers into Dylan's ear yet again. "I should take my own life. End it, for there is nothing left for me." As the demon's words permeate Dylan's mind, he places his gun against his head, believing the thoughts are his own. He can feel the muzzle pressed up to his temple, the weight of the fully loaded 9mm in his hand. With a slight squeeze of the trigger, it could all be over, Dylan thinks to himself. Maybe, then everyone would be happy. But then Dylan's self-perseverance kicks in. Dylan considers his alternatives. I know a lot about the illegal activities in this area. Perhaps I can use that knowledge. I can turn evidence on others of a much higher level of importance than myself, as I'm sure that such information will result in a much lighter sentence for me. Sure, I shot someone, but only one person that they know about. I can hand them mass murderers, serial killers, drug dealers. Yeah, I'm going to be okay, Dylan verbalizes under his breath. As Dylan's words leave his mouth, his demonic influencer, Shiva, is enraged. "Threaten my domain?" Shiva says to Dylan under her breath. "And you will pay not only with your life, but with your eternal soul." As Shiva's proclamation leaves her mouth, there is a coldness that fills the room, chilling Dylan to the bone. Later that same night, Shiva revisits her pawn's one-room, low-rent tenement. Dylan lays there on his couch, sound asleep, unaware of the demonic visitor, when suddenly Shiva is no longer alone. For she had received Agramon's request for a meeting, and she had granted him an audience. Agramon, the demon of fear, steps from the shadows, a look of disdain on his face as he glares first at Shiva and then down at Dylan's sleeping form. "Why have you summoned me to this place?" Agramon asked Shiva angrily. "To this maggot's abode. Could you not have found a more suitable venue?" As Agramon speaks, Dylan rolls over uneasily, pulling his covers up to his chin, discomforted by the chill his visitors are bringing to the atmosphere. "Your attempt to intimidate me will not work, Agramon, for you have no authority over me. I have asked you here," Shiva continues, "as I understand that you require a favor from me, and I'm prepared to grant it. but only if you lose your attitude, and Shiva says with a wicked smile, if you do me a favor in return. My informants tell me that you need a life taken. If that is the case, then I will influence this worm to do exactly as you ask, but only if you agree that after he has slain your victim, you will see to it that my assassin loses his life in return. He has given me his soul, and I am ready to have it. God has begun trying to draw him back to the faith of his youth, and I intend on seeing to it that that doesn't happen. Agreed, Agramon says dismissively. With the demonic pact now reached, Shiva gives a wave of her hand, and Dylan wakes up. Sitting up on his couch with a yawn, Dylan wipes his tired eyes and turns on his television, just in time to catch the nightly news. The reporter is telling the story of some place called the Bradbury estate in the neighboring town of Lancaster that everyone believes is haunted. Shiva begins whispering in Dylan's ear, Lancaster, over and over again, implanting it into Dylan's mind. She then soothingly assures him, I can easily hide in that place that they call the Bradbury estate. For the weak that are in that town are afraid of it, just as they should be afraid of me. I, on the other hand, am afraid of nothing. I am a warrior who can face anything that this world or the world to come can throw at me. Though the words and the thoughts came from Shiva, they are spoken to Dylan in the first person to convince him that the thoughts are his own. Finally, Dylan lays back down, quickly falling back to sleep. He rolls over uneasily, speaking the words Lancaster and Bradbury from somewhere in his dreams. Chapter 7. The Confrontation. Despite God's Spirit drawing Dylan to repentance, causing him to relive happier days through numerous visions from his childhood, Dylan's heart remains hard. So hard, in fact, that the morning after the demonic pact is made, Dylan steps outside of his building just in time to see an elderly woman placing a pocketbook, obviously stuffed with bills of unknown denominations, into her purse. Looking up and down the street, Dylan is confident that he is the only one that has seen this woman. So with a smile, he begins walking slowly but steadily in her direction. As he reaches her, they both arrive at the opening of a small alleyway. Don't you just love Social Security? Dylan asks her tauntingly as he grabs her, forcing the woman into the shadows. A few minutes later, Dylan emerges from the alley, counting a large sum of money, smiling from ear to ear. The old woman left behind, laying in this garbage-strewn street, the victim of Dylan's anger and violence. This is someone's mother or grandmother, yet Dylan disposed of her as if she were nothing more than rubbish. That afternoon, under the guise of self-preservation due to the COVID pandemic, Dylan hides his identity under a surgical mask. Wearing a ball cap, which he had pulled down over his eyes, and carrying a large duffel bag loaded with food, supplies, and a change of clothes. As he arrives at the local bus station, he does his best to blend in with those around him. Walking up to the ticket counter, he notices a couple of cops going from person to person, obviously looking for someone. I bet they're looking for me, Dylan says under his breath. It's then that he notices a sketch artist's rendition of him laying right there on the clerk's counter. So it is me that they're after, Cody says with a huff. Doing the best that he can, Dylan calmly yet quickly walks out of the bus station's main door. He breathes a little easier when about a block away he is confident that he has not been followed. With public transportation clearly out of the question, Dylan makes his way on foot to Highway 7, heading east toward the neighboring community of Lancaster. With his arm out and his thumb up, Dylan begins trying to hitch a ride. As expected, numerous cars drive by, never even slowing for the masked young man soliciting a ride from them. But eventually someone stops. It's a pleasant-looking, plump, middle-aged man driving a green mid-sized Ford sedan. The man doesn't scream of money, but compared to Dylan, he looks like $1 million. So, where are you going, son? The driver asks as Dylan jumps into the car. I'm heading to St. Louis to visit my aunt, Dylan says passively. The two men continue to make pleasantries, introducing one another. The driver's name is Larry Sanders from a small town called Myers, just a little north of Lancaster. Well, I can take you as far as Lancaster, the man says to Dylan. That sounds great. I'd really appreciate it. You know, the man says to Dylan, I'm glad I happened by. Do you know how dangerous it is to hitch a ride in today's world? I mean, how did you know that I wasn't a serial killer? Larry asks laughingly. Well, I figured the odds would be against two of us ending up in the same car, Dylan says flatly. What? Larry asks almost hesitantly. It's a joke, man, Dylan says laughingly. Oh, aren't you the funny one, Larry says, cracking up at what he now perceives as a joke. The ride is rather uneventful, especially because Dylan is trying to decide if he should repay Larry's act of kindness by killing him and stealing his car, or just letting him go. But eventually, Dylan decides that a stolen car is just another liability that he doesn't need. Finally, pulling up in front of the Lancaster Cafe, Larry reaches out his hand, offering Dylan the best of luck, again emphasizing the dangers of hitchhiking. From here, Dylan sets out, walking down side streets, doing the best that he can to go unseen, getting closer and closer to the elevated hilltop that is at the center of Lancaster, 236 Willow Lane, also known as the Bradbury Estate. He finally finds himself walking on the old gravel drive and then up the old mansion's steps, taking the knob into his hand and opening the main door. Look at him, Agramon says to the demon hen. My murderer has arrived and he's perfect. He believes that he's here to hide out, but I've brought him here instead to meet an old friend of mine, Mr. Cody Newman. Chapter 8. In this corner. From the night that the would-be ghost hunters were hospitalized, Cody has kept a nearly constant vigil on them, as well as on the cameraman, Matt, that though conscious, had been placed in a hospital psychiatric center. Matt has remained hunkered down in the corner of his room, tears streaming down his face, seemingly out of his mind, while the conditions of the others closely mirror the condition of Cody's father after his altercation with the demon of Lancaster. Cody's father, Michael, however, was not only in a coma, he would also suffer from violent tremors. It turned out that the tremors were based on a separation that had taken place between Michael Newman's spirit and his body being in the hospital, while his spirit was still somehow being held captive within the confines of that old estate. Maybe these kids are in the same condition, Cody says to himself. But I searched that mansion the night that all of this happened, and I not only didn't find any sign of them, but I also didn't feel their presence. The families of Candace, Melissa, and Garrett are at the hospital too, watching over their children and praying for God's intervention, when suddenly, unseen by anyone, just a few miles away, where the tragedy had actually begun, Agramon clenches his demonic fist, not in anger, but instead as a sign of power. As he does this, the bodies of all his victims begin shaking, hospital monitors screaming and hospital staff scrambling. Matt also rises from his corner, jumping, throwing his body against his room door, screaming like a wild animal. Cody jumps to his feet, now positive that these kids are being spiritually terrorized, exactly as his father had been. Cody begins praying aloud, his spiritual tongue piercing the veil between man and God, reestablishing peace in the intensive care unit and bringing calm once again to the psychiatric unit. Cody now knows that this is a spiritual altercation, a challenge from the demon Agramon addressed directly at him. So, as everything calms down, Cody stands to his feet in preparation to leave the hospital. He wants to call his wife Catherine to let her know to be praying, but he knows that he has to focus and he has to be alone with God right now. This will be the greatest battle of Cody's life, and it will be the final battle of Agramon's existence. Cody is sure of that. So rather than making the call himself, he stops and asks one of the nurses that he knows to make the call for him. Please, tell her what happened here and where I'm going. She'll understand, Cody says before leaving the area. As Cody pulls up outside of the abandoned mansion, he feels his heart skip a beat. He's confident that God is with him, for they had total communal between here and the hospital, but Cody's still human, so he's apprehensive over what he knows is coming. Walking from his car to the main entrance, Cody longs to use his cell phone to call his wife, even if just to hear her voice, but he knows that he must stay focused, for in this battle it will be his spiritual man that must maintain dominance. He knows that the nurse called Catherine, and at this very moment she has gone into her prayer closet and has joined the battle by his side. This knowledge boosts Cody's confidence, so as he walks from his car up the old steps, he does so as a warrior clad in the full armor of God, his loins girt up with truth, wearing the breastplate of righteousness, his feet shod with the preparation of the gospel, equipped with the shield of faith, the helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. As Cody opens the door, entering the all-too-familiar foyer, he does so in strength. There is no longer any apprehension in him, for he has entered the fray, not as a combatant, but as a victor, no matter how many spiritual assailants he may face. Chapter 9, Round 1. Agramon, realizing that the Cody that he now sees is not the same Cody that he faced nearly 6 years ago, takes an unnatural state, feeling fear rather than dispensing it, stepping into the shadows, hiding from Cody's gaze. "What are you doing?" Hen asks. "He can't see us." "Never underestimate a man who has been touched by God, Hen, for they walk in many spiritual gifts. That's why I have brought a fellow human here, a worm with free will that can kill him without spiritual intervention." As Agramon says these words, Dylan steps out of a side room, watching Cody from an elevated position on the second floor. Dylan looks over the banister and slowly pulls his pistol from his belt, pointing it at Cody. Dylan then imitates the sound of gunfire with his mouth and laughs. "It would be so easy to take you out, whoever you are." Yet he puts his gun back in his belt, leaving Cody alive for the moment. Agramon gives out a laugh watching Dylan. He's perfect. Too bad I agreed that he would be dead after he killed Cody. But so be it. "Go, Hen. Begin the next phase of my plan. Place a spirit of urgency inside of that friend of Cody's father, the cop that is too afraid to come here. His fear will keep him at bay for a time, but when he finally does show up, he will be what we will use to kill our pawn." As soon as Agramon issues the order, Hen leaves the old estate to visit our friend Joe Sheridan in his home. Cody continues searching the old estate, calling out, "Show yourself, you coward! I know you're here!" to the demon that he is there to do battle against. With no idea that a human adversary is hiding in the shadows with a look of confusion in his eyes. "Who is this guy?" Dylan asks himself, "and how does he know that I'm here?" As he remains out of sight, Dylan pulls out his butterfly knife, preferring to gut his victims by knife rather than killing them by gun, as it's just more personal that way. As Cody starts up the steps, moving to the second floor, praying for God's strength to fill his body, Dylan prepares himself for the altercation. Remaining just out of sight, he stays where he knows that he will be an arm's reach away when the time is right. Cody has no idea the danger that he's in, so he continues stomping from room to room, pushing doors open with no fear, calling out to God for his guidance. Then Dylan hears him. Cody is just one room away from him. "Where are you?" Cody calls out angrily, just as he enters Dylan's reach. "I'm right here," Dylan screams as he lunges at Cody, piercing his side with the knife. Cody is laying there in the middle of the second floor hall, clutching his midsection, feeling his blood-covered shirt. What just happened? Cody asks himself in shock, for this is not the fight that he anticipated. "Now, how did you know that I was here?" Dylan asks, screaming at Cody. "I didn't," Cody says convincingly. "Well, no matter. It's time I move on anyway. I'm assuming you brought me a car?" Dylan asks, now brandishing his gun. "Look, just take the car and leave. Here," Cody says, tossing the keys at him. "Oh, I'll take the car, but I'm not in too much of a rush to enjoy myself first," Dylan says, pointing the gun at Cody. "I hope that you really believe in this God that you are calling out to, because you're about to meet him," Dylan says, as the sound of demonic laughter echoes in Cody's ears. Then, suddenly, there's the sound of a gunshot, and with a look of shock on Dylan's face, he looks to his right, just at the top of the steps, and he sees Officer Joe Sheridan, gun still in hand. Dylan falls to the ground dead, now meeting the God that he has continuously rejected, the same God that he was preparing to introduce Cody to. "No!" Agramon screams in anger as scales fall from Joe Sheridan's eyes. Suddenly, just as God had allowed the Apostle Paul to see, Officer Joe Sheridan can now see the spiritual world around him. He sees the demon Agramon, and he sees him kneeling before his demonic master, crying out, "I only did what you told me to do!" Joe, who has now made it to Cody's side, aims his weapon at Agramon when Cody calls out, "Don't. It won't work. Just help me to my feet." Hen calls out to Sheridan, now aware that he can both hear and see them. "How did you come in here so easily? I knew that your fear would delay your arrival." Joe looks down at Cody and explains, "I've been praying and studying my Bible ever since you talked to me about ghosts that day. So when I felt a drawing to come here tonight, I just knew that God was going to be with me, and I therefore had nothing to fear." With these words, Joe helps Cody to his feet. "Look at you," Agramon laughs aloud. "You are weak and on the verge of death, and now you face my wrath? As soon as these words leave Agramon's mouth, there's a light that suddenly envelops Cody's body until it is no longer Cody that stands in the midst of the Bradbury estate. It is instead the Spirit of God. Agramon and Hen are gripped in fear, a fear greater than either of them have ever levied against a human soul. They fall down before the Spirit of God, crying out, "Thou art the Son of God." Without a word, the light intensifies, filling the old mansion. Cody and Joe are both on their knees, weeping in the light of God's holiness. The two demons are also still on their knees, wailing in pain and regret. Then, as quickly as God came and intervened, he is gone, leaving Cody and Joe alone in the now cleansed Bradbury estate. Chapter 10. I guess it's over. By the time that Joe arrives at Lancaster Memorial with Cody in tow, all of the would-be ghost hunters have recovered. Even Matt is seated with his friends once again in his right mind. They just all woke up simultaneously, Cody hears the doctor say laughingly. But seeing Cody covered in blood is enough to silence the sound of rejoicing. "What happened?" the doctor says, kneeling down beside Cody, taking a look at the stab wound. "I'll be fine," Cody says reassuringly. "I just had to check on the kids before I went down to the emergency room." Cody and the kids spend the next few days in observation, spending as much time as they can together getting to know one another, the medical staff doting on each one of them. Finally, upon their release, they all join together at the bequest of Mayor Pike and watch as the old Bradbury estate is leveled by a large backhoe. The city has finally decided that the land would be better used for a community center rather than a demon-infested haunted house. "You know," Cody says to the group, "the Bible actually tells a story about 7 brothers who were early demonologists. I bet in today's world these brothers would probably even operate their own internet channel," Cody adds with a smile. "Well, they were going around trying to cast out demons, saying, 'I bind you by Jesus whom Paul preaches.' Eventually, one of these evil spirits answered them, saying, 'Jesus I know, and Paul I know, but who are you?' Then the man with the evil spirit jumped on all 7 of them and overpowered them. These 7 adult men were beaten so violently that they ran from the house naked and hurt, not because they were weak physically, but instead because they didn't know Jesus. Well, today I'm going to make this Jesus known to you, and as you know him, the devils in turn will come to know each and every one of you."